Welcome to the Leadership Passport podcast, where we dive into the journeys, challenges, and insights of school and education leaders from around the world. I'm delighted to introduce my guest today, Conrad Hughes. Conrad is the Director General of the International School of Geneva. He's also a professor in practice at the University of Durham School of Education, Senior Fellow at UNESCO's International Bureau of Education, and a member of the Advisory Board of the University of the People. Conrad's most recent books include Education and Elitism, Challenges and Opportunities, Understanding Prejudice in Education, The Challenge for Future Generations, and Educating for the 21st Century, 7 Global Challenges. His most recent book, Changing Assessment, How to Design Curriculum for Human Flourishing, will be launched in May. Welcome, Conrad.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
So I understand you're a fireman in your local village. Tell me a bit more about that.
I think one of the challenges we face in international schools is the extent to which we can connect with our local communities. So when I settled in Switzerland, one of the first things I wanted to do was get involved in village life in one of the associations, as they're called. And there was a presentation of the fireman duties, which are not just about putting out fires, but also organizing the national day celebrations, planting flowers in the village, doing the open wine sales every year. And I haven't looked back on that decision because I'm known in the village. I feel that I'm integrated. I'm part of the community. It's kind of part of my philosophy of global citizenship education. It's local as well as global, right? So that's been great. And then there've been some pretty hair-raising moments. We had to put out a fire that was burning throughout the night. It was a 24-hour fire in a factory. It wasn't much fun. Yeah,
I can imagine. All right, so I'm going to start off with a really annoying question for you. If your leadership style was a song or a movie, what would it be and why?
I love that question, by the way. I like these analogies. If it were a song, it would be 1983, If a Mermaid I Should Choose to Be by Jimi Hendrix. I'll tell you why. It's a kind of, as a lot of music in the 70s, experimental rock, very long. It's about 12 minutes, and you've got this theme, which is a type of anthem that comes and goes. And there are moments where there's some turbulence, and with his guitar, he's creating the sound of what sounds like a shipwreck, whales calls under the ocean. And we come back with this crescendo and the theme at the end. So the idea being that I hope that my leadership has some kind of coherence, pattern, and message that can ride through different circumstances. And I'd hope that that message has a certain lyricism and poetry about it. It's not just trains running on times and obvious things. That's what I'd aspire my leadership to be. And if it were a film, that's actually more challenging. Maybe the thing is, my taste in cinema is more around the use of the camera than the plot. So I wouldn't want to be misleading in evoking a film that isn't sort of presenting the ideas that I endorse just because of its aesthetic quality. But probably something like one of the film noir productions from the early 20th century. Lady from Shanghai by Orson Welles, Citizen Kane, Orson Welles, North by Northwest by Hitchcock. Why? Because these are films that evoke, maybe at an unconscious level, the paradox, the mystery, and the beauty of life. And I feel leadership it's not just about how you can help people in a professional context, but it's about what you can do for their lives. So there's that existential dimension to it.
Yeah, amazing. So I guess carrying on from there, if we were to talk for a few minutes about maybe your leadership journey, what inspired you to become an international school leader?
I had this incredible teacher when I was at school. So I started in a very strict all boys school, religious school. And then I moved to a United World College, an international school. This was in Eswatini. It's called Waterford Kamhlaba. It's a great school, still exists today. And this amazing French teacher, Rolf Usman, he arrived on the scene, and I wanted to follow his lessons. I was allowed to do that, even though he was teaching French at a level that was higher than that I could really follow, and that I think inspired me to pursue a pathway in education. So yeah, I'd put it down to that teacher and the impact he had on me, the way he made me feel about myself, the passion with which he taught. Then the jump into international education, because I started in the French national system, was really through some contacts. One of my first principals, Dr. David Wilkinson, who was the head of the United World College of India, Mahindra, he knew me through my father, actually, because he's of that generation. I'd been to visit him in Machabeng, Lesotho, where he was the principal when I was, I don't know, about 10 or something. And I was looking for a job at the time, and he picked up my CV and invited me over to India and became my mentor. And that's really where the international pathway started. So I guess it's two people who've really impacted me. I mean, many people have impacted me, but if I'm going to pick two, it would be a teacher and a leader.
So then entering into leadership, can you identify, has there been a defining moment in your leadership journey over the years?
I like to think about leadership in terms of leadership moments. A leadership moment, it's a moment where you're put on the spot, where you have to take a decision. You might be able to use all of the mechanisms and risk mitigation that a good leader will use in a crisis. A network of people, committee, a group around you, so that you're masterminding the problem together. But in fact, often you can't, because you have to act quickly. Imagine you're running a meeting and someone stands up and starts screaming at you. What are you going to do? I mean, you're not going to hold a committee meeting to decide. You have to know how to respond. You have to take decisions. Sometimes you have tough conversations with people. These are leadership moments. You have to make a communication that might be difficult. It's a milestone communication. That's a leadership moment. So, I mean, I've had many. We had to take some important decisions around COVID, and we had to move quickly. We decided that the mantra would be that we keep the lifeline of learning going. Learning doesn't stop. Everyone went straight online. We sized down the curriculum, contact time. We changed the assessments. We built in a lot more sort of mindfulness. So we adapted to a screen-heavy environment. We came out of that pretty well. And I think that leadership moment was defined by working in a team. Where there have been moments where I've had to respond myself. So, for example, a difficult interaction or a moment in public, I've always tried to fall back on being calm and not rushing. You don't have to jump into a decision. Intuitively, you might want to do that, but sometimes you need to hold back a little bit, let your thoughts gather. Leadership moments are cropping up all the time. It's important to identify them and I think realize what they are and get in a kind of mindset when you think, okay, this is important. I need to get in the zone and make sure that I'm thinking this through carefully and not just to jump into decisions that might actually wind up being important.
Yeah. Is there a particularly tough challenge or moment that jumps out at you that, in the moment was, super tough? We're talking about the realities like on the ground of leadership.
Look, we set up a curriculum framework called the Universal Learning Program at the campus where I used to be the head. And this is very forward-looking. It's competence-based. And we really felt that bringing more physical education and arts into the curriculum diagram was going to be important. We communicated pretty fulsomely on that. We had to then pare down some of the periods in languages to get there. And of course, we got a pretty feisty response from parents. What's all this more PE and arts? Why are you cutting down on languages? Parents can be quite conservative. And, I had a kind of town hall. I decided to hold a public meeting and to put myself out there and face the music. So I had, a lot of parents come along and they weren't happy with the decision. And Discussions range from why wasn't there enough upstream consultation on this to what exactly are you trying to do. And so what I did was, a fairly lengthy workshop style pedagogic presentation on why this was important. And I tried to think about where they were coming from, which was academic rigor. Is this going to interfere with academic rigor? And I explained that balancing academic subjects with so-called non-academic subjects, so-called, is really important for the rhythm and the ergonomics of learning. And that, guess what? It's not by putting your kid in front of maths and English all week long that they're going to get better at those subjects. You need to interleave with other areas of learning, with other activities. And I think that it was pretty successful. So, sometimes we need to remember as school heads, as curriculum leads, that we are experts and that we need to educate our parents on curriculum design.
Yeah,
and that's the leadership one.
Yeah, of course. And it sounds like you handled that particular situation very well. Now, is there a time, or can you think to where it didn't go well? Particular mistake, or you look back and you think, oh, I wish I had have done that a bit differently.
Yeah. I mean, when I started, I was in the Netherlands, and this was probably my first leadership position, and it was middle leadership. I was a coordinator. I was a sort of year-level coordinator, academic. And I had some pretty difficult teachers in the team I was meant to be coordinating. I was very junior. I was in my late 20s, and I had folks who were pushing 60, and they knew their way around the block. They didn't really want to be in my meetings. I decided to do something on theory of knowledge because I figured that everybody needed to understand theory of knowledge in the IB diploma. It's obviously in the guide now that in every subject there's some TOK sort of thinking in the front matter, and this was at the inception of that. And what I wanted to do was get some TOK thinking going among the year heads that I was coordinating. And they weren't that interested. And I think because I was a bit young and insecure, I did a kind of workshop for them, but it was maybe I was lecturing them a little bit. And one of them actually interrupted me and said, "Look, this is so boring. And it just seems completely useless. I don't see what the point of it is." And I lost it. I got angry with him, and I was shirty with him, and walked out of the meeting. And another mentor who was actually in that same group, very magnanimous and wise, he came and said, "Look, I think you just need to be careful about your temper in the future. And if someone says something that irritates you, don't take it personally and what have you." So yeah, I would have done that differently. But, I deconstruct the idea of errors in life. I think, and this is part of my coaching background, you do what you do with the resources you have, and you're always wiser after the fact. So looking back, yeah, I could have done this differently. I could have done that differently. But the conditional tense is predicated on the fact that it happened. And if it hadn't happened, you wouldn't be having those thoughts. And, guess what? You're going to keep making mistakes. Don't beat yourself up about them and walk around in a state of deflated remorse. Learn quickly and learn forward. So, would I have done it differently? Yes, but then maybe not actually, because I needed to get through that to learn, right?
Yeah, you dealt with it with the skills and approaches and mindset you had at the time. And I mean, it's easy, hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? It's always easier to look back and think about how you could have done things differently. And but it's a pointless exercise, isn't it? So, is there a particular leadership practice or habit that has changed the game for you personally?
Definitely, it's coaching. So life coaching. I had this parent who came to see me. This must have been about 7 years ago, and said, "Have you heard of life coaching?" She'd done this Erickson coaching program, and you've got to do it. It's amazing, but it's very long. It's 4 months. You should put your whole team through it. And I thought, really? And I had a look at it, and I thought, let's do this. So I put my whole team and myself through this very lengthy coaching course in neuro-linguistic programming, built on the whole thinking of Milton Erickson, who was a Jungian psychologist from the United States in the 50s. That had a profound impact on the way that I looked, and I continue to look at life, at people, at motivation. it's based on the idea that everybody has the answers to the questions that they're seeking within them. And a leader is someone who asks powerful questions, picks up breadcrumbs that are left behind by the person who's doing the soul searching, and offers ways that the person looking for an answer might find the responses and the keys to unlock these problems within. So they're much more autonomous. You're not coaching like a sports coach where you're telling people what to do. In fact, you never tell people what to do. It's all about Socratic questioning. It also teaches you to listen much better. And that took me even further into neurolinguistic programming. And I followed a course by Robert Dilts, who's, he's from California, and he's been doing this work since the 60s, a kind of guru. He invented the logical levels pyramid, which is, it's all about what motivates us from the ground, the environment, all the way up to our purpose. And that's influenced the way I communicate, the way I use body language, images, analogies, and metaphors when describing an idea. Always looking for energy. Energy is what drives an organization. So where's the energy? It's revolutionized the way I look at things. I've done other leadership courses. Some of them have been great. The Harvard Business School and Graduate School of Education Certificate in Management and Leadership, CSML. I love that course. I put my whole team through it. But that's very much kind of nuts and bolts and, improvement plans, walking the school, data-driven decision. All of that's fine. That's great. But the coaching, it kind of took me to another level. It was a psychic experience.
That's great to hear. And it's surprising how often you hear that from others in terms of that are in leadership positions in education, how doing some sort of workshop or learning outside of education and seeing how they can bring that in, because we can be quite insular in education sometimes, and looking inward and bringing those outside perspectives in and stepping outside our roles and our little bubble can be just so powerful sometimes.
Look, we have to be future fit. We have to think about orchestrating innovation, the speed of change, the rapidity and the intensity of cycles of disruption, be they social, environmental, technological, economic, are really crazy. So to be kind of conceptualizing your leadership role as just concentrating on running the school, it's a bit, I won't say it's a mistake, but it's a very narrow approach. Your job is to run the school well, but you need to expand your thinking, your imagination, your networks. You need to draw from other industries. You need to look at examples. You need to listen and learn. And so I agree that going into other areas of knowledge, doing other things with yourself, stimulating curiosity, it's important because you transfer back into your work principles of innovative leadership, which will move your organization along. And I mean, you're not just standing still and concentrating on results. We're in an era of fast-moving change, and so something has to change in us as well. And I think that requires, this sort of network thinking.
Yeah, and you're talking about there, you reference being future fit. So how do you see international education and school leadership evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
So international education actually started here in the International School of Geneva. It was for the children of employees of non-governmental organizations. At the time, it was the League of Nations International Labour Office. From about the 60s, with the growth of the IB, it grew into an elitist, expatriate, Anglophone curriculum allowing for social mobility, with these top-tier schools in all the major capitals, the International School of whichever capital. And there's basically one per capital or a couple. Innovative thinking was always there. Desmond Cole Baker, who was the head of Ecolent at the time, when he was designing the IB with this team of teachers, he said, just forget about everything and think about what students need to know in 2000. And that's what's brought, some of the things we love in the International Baccalaureate so much, theory of knowledge, CAS, the interesting work you see in the PYP and the MYP, the exhibition, the personal project, units of inquiry. Now, since I'd say sort of the 1990s, we've seen a proliferation of tier two. When I say tier two, I don't mean in quality, but just in sort of economic model. International schools grow around these traditional models, and they tend to be they're drawing out the market share, and it's pushing these sort of oil tankers from the 60s to be a little bit more dynamic. Now, the IB is a forward-looking organization compared to other curriculum boards, I'd say. And I love the work Olli-Pekka Heinonen's doing. He's thinking about social and emotional learning, about competence-based learning, which is a passion of mine, and really about ensuring that we're creating a better tomorrow through education. And his take on innovation, I think, is very human-centric in an age when we're kind of turning to the digitization of everything very quickly. So that's good. But where the IB, like the AP, like the French bac, like A levels, like the maturité, all of these end of high school certificates, is trapped up, is caught up. It's by the pressures put on it, and on the assessment model, which really comes from universities, and that's an excessively traditional, almost backward-looking model. I mean, having students cooped up in exam halls for a month, writing short item responses on knowledge testing. We all know that that's not the best way to be nurturing competences and future fit competences today. But we're doing it because it's so difficult to undo. It's like trying to fix a plane while it's in the air. Everybody's got their back against the wall. No one wants to be a guinea pig. So there are these forces pushing in and keeping the assessment model at the end of high school so traditional that a lot of all that creativity that's going on earlier on is sort of drowned out. So in terms of innovation, that's a problem. And going back to my earlier point, the more competitive and aggressively competitive market share is pushing international schools, I think, to look for their KPIs, for their USPs, and to sometimes redefine themselves a little bit. I think increasingly international schools are trying to tap into the local market as well, because the expat market's not enough to keep them going. So there are all sorts of challenges that require future fitness, entrepreneurial thinking out the box at many levels.
Yeah, and what about for individuals? So teachers or middle leaders that were thinking, hey, I'd want to be a school head or superintendent one day. What piece of advice would you give to them?
First, I'd say that's good. It's good to want to be, to have a goal. Where am I now? Where do I want to be in 5 years? It's not easy to answer those questions. But don't be a hamster on a wheel, and don't just let life pass you by. It's not about ambition in terms of career, like, oh, I want to have a title. But maybe you want to have more impact. Maybe you want to diversify your experience. You want to grow. And I think just having that appetite is important. Sometimes what happens is you say, okay, I want to grow, but I want to stay in the school. And so it has to be here. So you start cutting your options down. Now, you have to be a bit of a risk taker. It's one of the learner profile qualities, right? So am I prepared to jump out of this ship and try something new? Am I prepared to go to a different country? Am I prepared to take risks? Am I going to give up maybe a contract where I'm protected into something which is a little bit more volatile? And that's just the mental threshold you have to get over. Because if you're not going to take any risks and you want to sit around and just become a leader in a highly secured environment, I don't think it's going to be very exciting, and it might never happen. So hold on to that ambition, nurture it, have a vision, and project yourself out there. And I guess, look, I don't have much of a lesson to tell on leadership than the next leader, but I would say that if intelligence is adaptability, then growing in leadership has to be about adapting to the feedback that you're getting. If you close your ears, if you've got too big an ego, if you can't handle criticism, you're not going to be a good leader, right? So, and that's not easy. These are things that they're almost at a spiritual level. You have to develop them.
And coming back to your earlier comments about coaching, being able to be coachable and being accepting and seeking out that feedback and actually taking it on board and doing something about it. So a couple of quick questions to wrap things up then, Konrad. Your favorite book on leadership?
Probably The Barcelona Way by Damien Hughes. Now, it's a pretty interesting book, The Barcelona Way. And, these sports analogies can get a bit tired. But what he does is he looks at Pep Guardiola, the football coach, and how he managed Barcelona and just some of the principles that he put in place. A coach of mine, David Porritt, actually recommended it to me. And it goes from knowing everybody in the organization, the groundsmen, the cleaners, right the way up the football team, to watching behaviors and looking at behavior as the most important indicator. It starts with a goal that's scored, and the manager turns and looks at the bench to see how they react. And he takes note of the players who jump up and they're happy, and those who sit there scowling because they're sulking as they weren't played. And he talks a little bit about what that's telling him, the signals, the weak signals that it's giving off. It goes from there all the way into culture and how important it is to build a leadership culture. So that's certainly a book I love about leadership. Also, I quite like history. History can teach you a lot. The 12 Caesars by Suetonius talks about Roman emperors. Now, I'm not saying that a school leader is like a Roman emperor, but effectively what you see is how important it is for them, those that survived, and not many did, not for very long, to consolidate the Praetorian Guard, the military, the Senate, and the Vox Populi, the people, the voice of the people. And you got some emperors who were disasters with the Senate and wound up getting assassinated by rivals, but were very popular. You've got others who were great politicians, but were hated by the people and overthrown. You've got others who were very militaristic, but didn't appease the Senate. And I think, some of the more successful Roman emperors, someone like Marcus Aurelius, they were loved by their people. They were good politicians, and they understood military tactics. So without sort of overdoing it, I think any leader, including a school leader, has to think about different constituencies. And there's some lessons from the past we can learn through that. What's my relationship with parents? First with the students, parents, staff, board, and how am I balancing all of that out? So there's some interesting historical analogies we can find to underpin some answers to questions around that.
Yeah, fantastic. For you personally, one thing you do daily that helps you to lead better?
Morning run. Get up in the morning with my dog, Milu. I would go for a run. Sometimes I don't feel like it, but I push myself, and every single time I just feel better after the run. It gets me in the space I need to for the day. There's some mind wandering that happens as you run. When you're in school leadership, there's quite a lot of sitting and standing around. I'm at a standing desk, but it's okay. You're walking the school, but you're not doing a lot of physical exercise. And you have to watch out for that. So that's something that helps me definitely.
Yeah, fantastic. A leader, past or present, you admire?
Okay, it's going to sound like a cliche. I'm a South African originally, but I can't speak about leadership without thinking of Nelson Mandela. I think what's interesting is maybe why, because there's so many different things you can say about Nelson Mandela. And what I found particularly interesting in another great book about leadership, by the way, which is Long Walk to Freedom. It's Mandela's autobiography, which he actually wrote himself in prison in Pollsmoor and in Robben Island. It's all of the lessons in leadership that he learned from his traditional upbringing around African chiefdom. The Indaba, which is this circle discussion you have. If there's tension in the group, you get everybody together and you discuss it. So there's this collective approach. He's very much someone who led from behind. And as a child, at one point, he was a shepherd and talked about the leader as a shepherd. You're sort of behind your people. he was someone with enormous courage and convictions, and was actually willing to sacrifice himself for them. So, it's difficult to argue against that. And then possibly the most amazing thing about Mandela is his ability to federate. First, he brought the African people of South Africa together in the African National Congress as the secretary. Then he managed to get the whole anti-apartheid movement together. Then when he became the president of the country, he managed to get white South Africans, people who had supported apartheid, on board. He took the symbol of apartheid, which was the Springbok rugby team, and kind of converted it into a new expression of a free South Africa. And in the end of his life, he became an elder. And so he was like a universal father figure for the whole world. And so what you got there, it's what Arthur Koestler calls holons and holographs. So it's sort of the microcosm, macrocosm effect. Everything that you do as a leader is connected to something bigger. The extent of that bigness that you want to entertain it will define the extent of your power. So if your imagination and your scope of leadership stops at your school or your units, you'll be limited. But if you can take it to, a national, a societal, an international, a cosmic, a timeless level, you're drawing much more in. And Mandela clearly had that. He's not the only person who's had it, but not many people do. But he had that kind of out of world consciousness that would just draw everybody in. So, incredible leader.
Yeah, 100%. And finally, best advice you've ever received?
My father, who's no longer with us, he used to say quite a lot, don't take yourself too seriously. Walk around with a long face and think, this is all very important, and nothing's that important in the long run. It was Charlie Chaplin who said that life, it's a tragedy in close up, but a comedy in long shot. So put things into perspective. Don't freak out. Things are going to be okay, and try and see the silver lining in it.
Well, I think that's a great way to finish things there. So thanks so much for joining me today, Konrad. I really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kevin. I like those questions. There were a couple of curveballs in there.
Thanks so much for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, etc. Drop a comment below to let me know anything you'd like covered in upcoming episodes or suggestions for future guests. You can also connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn.